All right, let's try something here real quick. I don't know how well I'm going to be able to manage this, but let's talk vampires for a minute. Salem's Lot, by the way. This is my copy of the Stephen King library, I think is what it was, in the 80s and 90s. They would send you a hardback every month. This is my copy from when I was like 13 or 12 years old. So anyway, let's set that down. It actually looks almost exactly like a copy that was apparently worth a ton of money back in the day. It was, if it had, there was a typo in it, and that typo referenced a character. I think it was the priest, and I keep wanting to say Father Callahan. They had renamed him, and in the book there was a mistype. It had an old name, had his original name. And when I saw that it was on Christie's, it was like, I think it was going for like crazy amounts of money too, like hundreds of thousands of dollars, this book. I flipped. I thought, oh my God, I own that copy. Because that's the exact cover. That's everything. I think I have that copy. And no, it's not. I don't have that. So I'm going to actually try to go down into the yard. Looks nice today. Bear with me, this is kind of an ad hoc little vlog today. But I wanted to talk a little bit about vampires in fiction. And not just in books, but also in movies and film and television shows. Let me see if I can sit down out here. It's nice out here today. Sorry, I haven't mowed either, so my lawn is getting pretty crazy. But I wanted to talk fiction. If you've read Salem's Lot, it's awesome. It's a really good book. And I'm reading it for the third or fourth time right now. And it's super good. I really like it a lot. But I've always liked vampires. The idea of a vampire, of living forever and kind of having those powers and the seductive nature of vampires. And I thought, one day I'm going to write a vampire story. And then as I got older, I realized, no, I'm not. No, it's been done a billion times. There's so much vampire fiction out there. And in film, in literature, there's just so much vampire fiction out there that I thought, there's just no way. I'm not going to write. What could I do that hasn't been done? And how in the world would I even do it better? And some of the best, if you've read Bram Stoker's Dracula, it's great. If you're reading it like coming in late to the game, it's not what you think when you read that. But I love it. I thought it was great. If you've read any, like Stephen King, Salem's Lot, any of the other bajillion vampire books out there. I was real into Anne Rice for a time when she was doing the Lestat and Interview with the Vampire, and I really liked those books. And what kind of got me to say, no, I'm not going to write fiction. Vampire stories was, one, it had been done a million times, and two, I just thought, I don't know, I think I've seen it all, and I don't know if I could do better than that. I keep looking at the wrong side of my camera because I'm not sure where the lens is when I flip it like this. But recently I started noticing another trend in vampire fiction. There's a fire or something going on around here. I keep hearing the alarm, so sorry if that's kind of messing the sound up a little bit. Something's going on though. This trend was these just kind of emo, sad, depressed, just there's something going on. Somebody just yelled. Vampire, sorry, I keep getting distracted. And it was just, man, I got sick of seeing it all the time. Everything from, I guess if you go back to Louis and Interview with the Vampire, he was, he was, at least in Interview, he was real depressed and just, then I watched the same shows that everybody else did, Buffy, that I really don't consider that vampire fiction. But I guess, hey, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I watched that show. Who didn't? An Angel. Who didn't my age anyway. I also watched the Vampire Diaries, and I kept getting so sick and tired of the depressed vampires. I can say that I have not read the Twilight books, and I have not seen the movies. Nothing against them. I know plenty of people who have, and plenty of people who love them. It just didn't seem, at that point in time, something that I would be interested in. And I didn't understand the whole sparkle thing. So, what is happening? Did you guys hear that? I think I have to go help my neighbor. All right, sorry about that. I moved inside between the fire engines and what was all going on out there, and then my neighbor's dogs got in a tussle. I was gonna run over there and see if I could help, but they were just scrapping, and they were fine. It just sounded violent. I don't know if you guys heard it, but it sounded like bad. Oops, sounded like they got in a tussle with a raccoon or something. Where were we? Oh, vampires. Oh, but the trend I kept seeing was just these just really depressed characters and just sad, and I just got sick of it. And it was everywhere. Vampire fiction was everywhere. It was on television. It was in the movies. It was in literature. It was in games. It was everywhere. And I thought, no, I'll never write a vampire novel or a story. But I kept coming back. I kept asking. I kept looking for more vampire, a movie or a story or something. But I kept getting let down, and I kept thinking, well, what is it that I'm missing? What is it that I'm not seeing, or what is it that I'm not getting in vampire fiction that I'd really like to see? And you know what I missed? I missed the vampires from The Lost Boys, right? Just rock and roll. I can't remember the tagline for that movie. It was something like, party all night, sleep all day. It's fun to be a vampire, or and live forever, or something like that. And I just thought, man, those are the vampires I miss. I love that movie. What was the another great vampire film that I love, and it's a cult classic at this point, was Fright Night. And that vampire was just cool, smooth as silk, and he was more, wasn't the depressed vampire. He was just, cool. And I thought, that's what I miss. That's what I miss about vampires. Why am I not seeing that anymore? And I had read so many books that had like vampires as characters, as secondary or tertiary characters, but never the protagonist, never the main. And if I did find something that was like that, they ended up being, kind of a depressed soul. Was it Grave Peril? Was it Strange Practice is a series I just started getting into. By the way, if you've never read Strange Practice, it's awesome. It's I think it's part of the Greta Van Helsing series. It's really cool. If you just check that series out. The writer, she's awesome, and I just can't remember her name at the moment, but that's a good series, and it's got some vampires in it. It's got all kinds of cool monsters and stuff in it. But anyway, without getting sidetracked, I thought that's what I missed. I missed those traits. I missed that vampires, he was going to have fun with it. I don't mind the tragic side of things that's inherent with the classic vampire. Live forever, watch all your friends get old and grow old and die or get sick, and when you're not, yes, that would suck. But I tried to think back to what I would do, how would I exist if suddenly I had been turned into a vampire. Maybe at this age I'd act a lot differently than I would when I was in my 20s. Regardless, I don't think I would act too differently. You're not going to become, I wouldn't think, this just bloodthirsty killer. You're not going to suddenly disregard the value of human life. You're not like, that was a problem I had with some of the vampires in the Lost Boys, was that they just seemed to be they were cool, don't get me wrong, but they were just bloodthirsty kind of freaks to a degree. I always wondered, when you see them kill somebody, I think they were taken out like neo-Nazis. At that point, I thought, cool, good on them, you know? But I can't be certain on that. They could have just been punks on the beach. Anyway, that's what I decided. I thought, well, all right, that's the vampire. I want to bring that kind of vampire back. And I started thinking about a story. A couple of years ago, this weird image came into my head. And it didn't have a story, it didn't have a background, I didn't really know anything about it, and it just kept sticking there. One of those images of a scene from a movie where something happens and it just sticks in your head. You keep thinking about it over and over and over again, or it comes into your head at night when you're trying to go to sleep. And this image was simple. It was a guy sitting out on an overlook up in the mountains around here. There's a little hike called Humpback Rock. And the vision in my head was this guy just sitting out there at night, just looking out over the valley and the stars, right? And a vampire kind of shows up, just kind of floats down and just starts talking to him. And I didn't, like I said, I didn't have a story. I just had that image in my head, that what would that conversation be like? And who is this vampire, and why is he there? And who's this person that's sitting out there, and why is he sitting out there? And I just kept thinking about it. And finally one day I just sat down and said, you know what, I'm writing this thing. And it was the first time I really started writing like in earnest. I took 10 years off between novels, and I wish I could have those 10 years back. So if I can give advice to any new writers out there, man, I would give anything to have those 10 years back. So no matter if you can avoid it, and if that's what you want to do, and you want to be a writer, don't stop for anything. And I could give you a million different excuses as to why I stopped. And it had nothing to do with the love of the craft or the art, or that I didn't love writing anymore. And it had everything to do with like every other aspect of my life, including a heart attack, right? But let me come back around to where I was. I picked up the pen, or so to speak, and I started working on this story again. And it was based on that image, and based on, you know what, screw it, I'm going to write some vampire fiction. Maybe I can pull something off. I don't know. And I just fell in love with it. And next thing I know, about, 3-4 months later, I had a book. And I handed it over to Mary. She's my ideal reader, quote unquote. She started reading it, and I sat down and I told her, like, that day we went on a walk and I'd given it to her, and she was all excited to read it. And we were on a walk, and I said, hey, I'm gonna take some time off after this one, take a few weeks and kind of get my head around maybe a new story or something. And I waited something like 12 hours. And the next day, that morning, I started working on book 2. And I envisioned a series, 3 books in that series. And I think the series could go further, but I pictured this one story that would take about 3 novels to tell. And I literally started on it the next day, and I wrote the second book just as quickly as I wrote the first book, which is, I write fast anyway, but I just was able to kind of create that character and those characters that I just really liked about the vampires that I envisioned, or that I fell in love with back in the 80s and 90s. Just cool cats. And that's the character that I created. That's kind of the characters that I created. And I also put them in a situation that I've never really seen vampires in. I've always wondered what would happen if you took a vampire and dropped them into X, Y, or Z scenario. And this isn't like vampires in space or anything like that. I think that's been done. But I just thought, why haven't I seen vampires in X, Y, or Z scenarios? And I don't want to give too much away about Lineage when it comes out. But I think is a new take on vampires, or at least I'm brushing off an old version of a vampire. Um, by the way, Gary Oldman in Dracula, Coppola's film, oh, love him. But also kind of a depressing emo kind of guy, a little. But yeah, so that's what Lineage is, and that's vampires, and that's what I grew to kind of dislike about vampires, and that trend of just making them depressed all the time, and just emo all the time, and I just could not. I hated it because it's not how I would have envisioned myself being given something like that. You know, whether it's a gift or a curse remains to be seen, and that's up to the individual. I think if you're going to take that, take somebody and turn them into a freaking vampire. But yeah, that's what Lineage is, and that's kind of where I'm trying to kind of bring vampires back. And I started seeing all, you know, if any of you watched the like Vampire Diaries and things like that. Next, I got sick of seeing vampires walking around in the daylight. I've always, and I know even Dracula could do that, but I thought, ah, man, I just like some of those classic tropes. Can't go out in the sunlight. I never really understood the whole mirror thing to a degree, and the cross thing, and the church and all that. Stephen King does a really good job with explaining how that works in Salem's Lot. But I missed seeing some of those things. Those things didn't seem to happen in a lot of the later fiction and recent vampire fiction. Those things just kind of went away. It was like, it's too expensive to shoot at night all the time. So we'll give them this magic ring that lets them walk around in the daylight and crap like that. But anyway, I'm rambling a little bit. So that's vampires, and that's what Lineage is going to be. And hopefully it will come out, if all goes to plan and all sticks to schedule, the second-ish week in October. You can pre-order it now on Amazon, which is really cool that they're letting me do that. And book 2, I'm hopefully going to have out in November or December. I'm going to get 1 and 2 out before Christmas, and then 3 the first quarter of 2021. So there. That's me. That's vampires. That's kind of what Lineage is going to be, and that's where I hope vampire fiction goes for at least a little while. Get rid of the depressed vampires and let's bring on the old school. Let's bring back the Lost Boys kind of vampires for just a little bit. So that's it. See you guys.